The taste of revenge is a peculiar thing. It's not the coppery tang of blood or the acrid smoke of a burning bridge. No, for me, after 60 years of waiting, it tastes like filtered air. It's the sterile, cool, utterly perfect flavor of a climate-controlled environment, of recirculated oxygen scrubbed of all impurities. It's the taste of the inside of my bunker. I drew a deep, satisfying breath of it now. The hum of the geothermal generators a symphony in my ears. My throne, a custom-made ergonomic leather chair, faced the wall of monitors, a bank of glowing eyes showing me the outside world, or, more specifically, showing me my family. They were all out there, huddled on the manicured lawn, under the false twilight of a late autumn afternoon. My son, David, with his weak chin and perpetually disappointed expression, the one head worn since he realized my money wouldn't flow to him unconditionally. His wife, Cynthia, a porcelain vase of a woman, beautiful, hollow, and just waiting for the right tremor to shatter her. And their spawn, Jason, the entitled little shit who'd never worked a day in his life. And Chloe, the social media princess who documented every vacuous moment of her vacuous existence. They thought the world was ending. And in a way, for them, it was. It began, as all great plans do, with a seed of truth. I am a prepper. Have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis scared the hell out of me as a boy. While other kids were playing baseball, I was learning to can vegetables and purify water. That paranoia, that drive to be self-sufficient, was the engine that built my fortune. I didn't make my billions in tech or finance. I made it in industrial storage solutions, logistics, and later, in survival gear. I sold people the means to preserve their normalcy, and I sold the fearful the means to escape the end of it. The irony was never lost on me. The bunker wasn't a secret. The family knew about it. They'd laughed about it for years, a source of endless amusement at Christmas dinners and summer barbecues. Brad's Folly, they called it. Grandad's Doom Fort. They'd sip my expensive wine and mock the years of planning, the millions poured into reinforced concrete, into the hydroponic farms, the armory, the surgical suite, the vast library of physical books and digital archives on everything, from metallurgy to midwifery. They saw it as the eccentric hobby of a rich old man, a quaint madness they tolerated, because the money was so very, very real. They never understood it was my masterpiece. The first step of my plan was the convincing. It had to be flawless. I couldn't just shout the end is nigh. They'd have patted me on the head and called the doctor. No, I had to make them believe they'd discovered it themselves. It started 6 months ago. I began to change. I let the meticulously maintained facade of the jovial, slightly dotty grandfather slip. I became withdrawn. I stopped playing golf. I had urgent meetings that required secure lines. I started leaving ominous files on my study desk doctored, of course reports on geopolitical instability, pie charts showing the fragility of the supply chain, scientific papers on a hypothetical solar flare event it paid a postdoc in Romania to write. David was the first to notice. Dad, everything all right? You seem stressed. I let my hand tremble just slightly as I poured a scotch. It's nothing, son. Just the world. It's a shaky house of cards. One good gust I trailed off, staring into the amber liquid as if it held all the secrets of the coming collapse. I seeded the fear carefully, watering it with half-truths and worried glances. I accidentally left a news channel running on a story about a new, aggressive flu strain. I slipped up and mentioned it liquidated several long-term stock holdings and converted the assets into gold bullion and cryptocurrency stored on an offline drive. Their antennae, always tuned to the frequency of money, began to twitch. The breakthrough came with Jason. The boy is a parasite, but he's a tech-savvy one. He's the one who hacked my private server. Or rather, he accessed the honey-potted meticulously built for him, a digital vault filled with just enough security to make breaking in feel like a triumph, and filled with the truth. He burst into the living room one evening, his face pale, his eyes wide with a fear that wasn't for himself, but for his own skin. Grandad, oh my God, Grandad, is it true? I feigned shock, then anger. What have you done? Jason, that was a private server. The report from the Institute, the Carrington level event, it's not a model. It's a forecast, he stammered. The document was a work of art, filled with real scientific terms woven around a core of terrifying fiction. It predicted a coronal mass ejection of unprecedented scale, one that would fry the world's electrical grid, plunging humanity back into a new dark age. A dark age with no electricity, no internet, no running water, no law. The family gathered around, their skepticism melting into cold, hard dread as Jason sputtered out his findings. I let them talk themselves into it. Cynthia started crying about her Instagram account. David started mentally calculating his portfolio's worth in a world without electricity. It was pathetic. I became their reluctant oracle. I didn't want to worry you, I said, my voice heavy with fabricated grief. It hoped, it prayed the models were wrong. But the data, I gestured helplessly at the screens. The bunker, it's rated for this. It's shielded. We have power, food, water, security. We can wait it out. 4 years, if necessary. Suddenly, Brad's folly didn't seem so foolish. It seemed like the only life raft on a sinking ship. But then, I introduced the catch. My masterpiece within the masterpiece. There's not enough room for everyone, I said, lowering my eyes as if ashamed. A blatant lie? The bunker could house 24 people in comfort. The resources are calculated for a specific number. Bringing in extra mouths, it would endanger everyone. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. They started babbling, pleading. David, my own son, said, Dad, you can't be serious. We're your family. That's why I'm giving you a chance, I said, my voice hardening. A spot isn't guaranteed by blood. It's earned. This isn't a vacation home. It's the future of the human race. I need contributors. Survivors, not passengers. I laid out my terms. My apocalypse entrance exam. David, the corporate vulture, was tasked with securing hard assets. I wanted gold, silver, platinum, not on paper, physical. He had to use his contacts, his dwindling liquid funds, to acquire it, transport it, and store it in the specified location, all without raising suspicion. I watched him turn into a desperate, sweating smuggler, and I savored every moment. Cynthia, the delicate flower, was assigned to the medical wing. She had to become proficient in field medicine, triage, and minor surgery. I hired a brutal ex-army medic to tutor her. I have video of her fainting at the sight of a practice suture or a raw chicken breast. She learned, though. Fear is a powerful teacher. Jason, the tech wizard, was given the communications and security systems. He had to learn the bunker's entire network, its satellite uplinks, its radio arrays, its defensive measures. He thought it was because his skills were invaluable. In truth, it was so he could personally set the stage for his own imprisonment outside. Chloe, the influencer, had the hardest task. She was to inventory and master the hydroponic and aquaponic systems. The girl who'd never grown anything but a follow account had to learn how to grow food. Her hands, once only used for typing self-congratulatory captions, became chapped and dirty. The humiliation was a beautiful thing to witness. For 6 months, they toiled. They became a family again, united by a common goal, saving their own hides. They thought they were proving their worth to me. They were actually building their own prison. Every bar of gold David secured was another lock on the door. Every medical procedure Cynthia learned was another reason they couldn't survive without me. Every system Jason mastered was a system I could use to deceive them. Every plant Chloe nurtured was a crop they would never eat. The appointed day arrived. According to the forecast, the solar storm was imminent. I called them all to the estate. The air was electric, with a fear they thought was real. It's time, I said, my voice a low gravel of feigned urgency. The leading edge of the plasma cloud will hit within the hour. We have to get underground. I led them on the final walk across the lawn to the bunker's entrance. A massive, circular blast door set into a gentle, grass-covered slope. It looked like something from a sci-fi movie. To them, it looked like salvation. They were clutching their go bags, filled with the sentimental trinkets they couldn't bear to leave behind. Cynthia had a photo album. David had a bottle of 47 Cheval Blanc. Idiots. They still didn't get it. With a hiss of compressed air, the great door began to swing open, revealing the brightly lit airlock chamber beyond. The hum of the machinery was a siren's song to them. They hurried inside, their faces etched with relief, already shedding the fear of the outside world. I followed them in. The interior door, even thicker than the first, stood between them and the main living area. They crowded forward, eager to see the sanctuary they'd worked so hard to earn. I stopped just inside the outer door. "Dad, come on," David said, impatiently. I smiled then. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile I'd been storing up for 60 years. It was the smile of a man finally cashing a debt of neglect and ridicule that had compounded with interest for a lifetime. "I want to thank you," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the chamber. "Your work these last 6 months has been exemplary. You've secured the resources. You've learned the systems. You've made this bunker completely operational and self-sufficient." Cynthia beamed, a fragile, proud thing. "Oh, Brad, we just did what was necessary for the family." "For a family," I corrected her softly. "Just not yours." The smile didn't leave my face as I took a single step backward, out of the airlock. My hand found the control panel on the outside wall. The looks on their faces, God, I wish I could have bottled them. The dawning confusion, the slow, terrible erosion of relief, the first icy trickle of understanding. It was better than any wine. "Dad," David's voice was a whisper. What are you doing?" "What I should have done a long time ago," I said. "Saying goodbye." I slammed the heel of my hand on the large, red button. With a deep, resonant clang that I felt in my bones, the outer blast door began to swing shut, cutting off their view of the outside world, sealing them in the bright, white, sterile chamber. The last thing I saw was Jason's face, contorted in sudden, terrified understanding. And then there was only the smooth, rounded surface of 3 feet of reinforced steel and polymer. The locks engaged with a series of satisfying, final-sounding thunks. Hermetic seals hissed shut. They were in a very expensive, very secure box. I walked the 30 yards back to the hidden secondary entrance, a cleverly disguised maintenance hatch that led down a short tunnel and into the control room itself. I never even broke a sweat. And now, here I sit, in my throne, the taste of filtered air on my tongue, the symphony of machinery in my ears. On the main monitor, a feed from the airlock camera shows them. They're pounding on the inner door. Their mouths are open in screams I can't hear. The chamber is soundproofed. David is red-faced, spittle flying as he shouts my name. Cynthia has collapsed in a heap, the perfect porcelain vase finally shattered. Jason is frantically working on the keypad beside the inner door, trying to use the codes he himself installed. He doesn't know I've already changed them permanently. Chloe is just staring up into the camera lens, her eyes wide with a betrayal, so complete it seems to have short-circuited her brain. I lean forward and toggle the intercom for the airlock. My voice, calm and clear, booms into their prison. "I wouldn't waste your energy," I say. The door is rated to withstand a direct hit from a bunker buster. Your fists aren't going to do much. They all freeze, looking around for the source of the voice. Their eyes find the camera. "Why?" David screams, his voice tinny over the speaker. "Why are you doing this? Why?" I chuckle, sipping from a glass of cool water. "Let's call it an inheritance issue. You were always so worried about what'd leave you. Well, this is it. I'm leaving you the lesson your mother and I never taught you. The world doesn't owe you a damn thing. Not even me. You're insane." Cynthia shrieks. "Probably." I agree amiably. But I'm the insane one in the comfortable chair with the fresh water and the enough food to last a lifetime. You're the same ones in a concrete box. I switch the main display to the external cameras. The show is about to start. Now, if you'll stop your caterwauling, you might want to watch this. The main event is about to begin. On the monitors, the view of the sky above my estate begins to change. It's a masterpiece of special effects, coordinated by a team of Hollywood technicians I paid an absolute fortune to. The light begins to dim, Not like a sunset, but like a slow, sickly fade. A deep, pulsating aurora begins to bleed across the horizon, greens and reds of an unnatural, terrifying intensity. It's starting, I narrate, like a sinister David Attenborough. The geomagnetic storm. The first waves of charged particles are hitting the atmosphere. Beautiful, isn't it? Inside the airlock, they're pressed against the reinforced glass of the viewport, their faces illuminated by the ghastly, shifting light of the fake apocalypse. Then, the lights in the airlock go out, plunging them into darkness. A terrified scream echoes from the speaker. I'd had that programmed in, too. A little blackout to set the mood. The emergency strips kick in a moment later, casting a dim red glow over their terrified faces. On the external feeds, the real show begins. One by one, the lights of the city in the distance begin to flicker. Then, in a wave of darkness, they go out. The entire valley is plunged into blackness, except for the eerie, dancing aurora overhead. I had a team on the ground, paid handsomely for their discretion, throw the main breakers at the regional substation. A blackout of this scale will be national news by morning, a mysterious outage. For my family, it will be proof positive that the end has come. Oh my God. Chloe whispers, her voice raw. It's real. It's all real. The grid is gone, I say, my voice full of fake grimeness. Everything is gone. The light you're seeing now, that's the last of the world's energy bleeding away into the sky. I switch a feed to a pre-recorded clip of shaky, chaotic video of looting in a city street, cars on fire, people running. It's footage from a riot spliced with some CGI effects of electrical explosions. It's utterly convincing. Jason sinks to his knees. We're dead. Not yet, I say. You have air for another 48 hours in there. The scrubbers are on a separate circuit. After that I let the sentence hang. I lean back, steepling my fingers. The aurora on the screen washes the room in a blood-red light. This is it. The culmination. They are in hell, a hell of my making, and I am its sole, contented witness. The slights of a lifetime being avenged with every sob that crackles over the speaker, with every pound of David's futile fist against the unyielding door. This is my masterpiece, my revenge, not to kill them quickly, but to let them die slowly, knowing they were so close to salvation, knowing they'd earned it, and knowing that the man who pulled it away from them was the one they'd taken for granted their entire lives. The taste of revenge is filtered air, and it is exquisite. Of course, here is the second part of the story. The red emergency lights in the airlock cast them in a hellish glow. They were no longer individuals, but a single, writhing organism of panic. David was the beating, furious heart of it, hammering his fists against the cold steel of the inner door until his knuckles were raw meat and blood smeared the pristine white surface. Each thud was a dull, satisfying punctuation mark to my triumph, transmitted through the speakers in my control room. "You psychotic bastard," he screamed, his voice cracking with a strain I'd never heard before. It was the sound of a man whose entire understanding of the universe had just been inverted. "Let us out. This isn't funny." "Funny," I mused, taking a sip of water from a chilled glass. "No, David, it's not meant to be funny. It's pedagogical. Consider it a very, very late lesson in consequences." Cynthia was the weeping nervous system of their little organism, curled into a fetal position on the hard floor, her body racked with sobs that seemed to suck all the air out of the chamber. The perfect, manicured society wife was gone, replaced by a raw, animal thing. She'd spent a lifetime cultivating an image of unflappable elegance, and to see it evaporate in the span of minutes was more satisfying than any fine wine. Jason was the frantic, scrambling brain. He was at the keypad, his fingers flying, trying every bypass, every backdoor, every command line override he'd painstakingly learned. The sweat on his forehead gleamed in the crimson light. He was muttering to himself, a stream of technical jargon and desperate curses. He didn't know it yet, but he was trying to solve a puzzle designed to be unsolvable. Every code he entered was a love letter to my foresight. It even left a few false positives commands that would make a light flicker or a fan her softly, just to give him a shred of hope, to keep him working, to keep him invested in his own torture. And Chloe was the eyes. She wasn't screaming or crying or frantically working. She was just staring, frozen, at the viewport, at the night mode painted across the sky, the aurora borealis on steroids, a vengeful god's light show, the complete and utter blackness where the city lights used to twinkle. She was watching the world end, and the sheer, unimaginable scale of it had short-circuited her. Her phone was clutched in her hand, a useless brick. Her connection to her thousands of followers, her validation, her entire identity severed. She was nobody now, and she knew it. I let them stew for a good hour, let the reality of their situation sink past the initial shock and into their marrow. The airlock was spacious for what it was, but with 4 people in a state of sheer terror, the oxygen would be getting a little thick. I could almost smell their fear through the monitors. I keyed the intercom again. The sound made them all jump. Comfortable? I asked. David spun towards the camera, his face a mask of fury and despair. What do you want? Money. Is that it? Everything. You can have everything. Just open the goddamn door. I laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh that felt good in my chest. David, look outside. What, precisely, is everything worth now? Your stock portfolio, your real estate holdings, that bottle of wine you brought. It's all kindling. Son, this was never about money. I have all the money I could ever need, right here. Then why? Cynthia wailed from the floor, her voice a broken thing. We're your family. Ah, the F word, I said, my voice turning cold. Family. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. A family doesn't just show up for the will reading. A family doesn't mock the person who provides for them. A family doesn't treat the patriarch like a doddering old fool whose only purpose is to sign checks until he has the decency to die. We loved you, she cried. You loved my Amex Black Card, I corrected. You loved the vacation homes. You loved the trust funds. You loved the idea of me. But you never loved me, the man who built it all. You never saw the work, the sacrifice, the sheer fucking will it took to claw my way up from nothing to this. I gestured around my control room. You just saw the end product and felt entitled to it. I leaned closer to the microphone, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper they had to strain to hear. Let me tell you a story about a family. It starts with a little boy, a boy whose father worked himself into an early grave trying to provide, and whose mother wept every night from the worrying of it. That boy learned two things: that the world is a cruel, unforgiving place, and that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. We don't care about your pathetic childhood trauma. David snarled. Let us out. Pathetic, I said, a smile in my voice. Perhaps, but it's the foundation everything was built on. That boy grew up. He met a woman, a beautiful, kind woman who saw the fire in him, not just the money he could make. We built a life, a real one. We had a son. You, David. I paused, letting the name hang in the air. I could see him through the camera, the anger momentarily faltering, replaced by confusion. She was everything. Your mother. She was the heart I never had. She was the one who softened my edges, who made me believe that maybe, just maybe, connection was possible. And then she got sick. The air in the control room felt different now. The sterile, filtered air suddenly felt heavy. This was the part of the story I hadn't planned to tell. The raw nerve. You were at college, David, living it up. You came home for the funeral. You stayed for a week. You were sad, sure, but you were also impatient. You had a life to get back to. Parties, friends. You never saw what it did to me. You never saw the hole it tore in the universe. That's not fair, David whispered, but there was no force behind it. Fair. I spat the word. Don't talk to me about fair. After she was gone, you became vultures, circling, waiting for me to finally join her so you could pick the carcass clean. You'd call, not to talk, but to ask for something. A loan for a new car, a down payment on a house you couldn't afford. You'd visit on holidays, and the conversations were empty. You'd laugh at my quirks behind my back. I heard you. The old man's losing it. When is he going to just relax and enjoy his money? My money. Always my money. I was standing now, pacing in front of the bank of screens, my finger jabbing at the image of my son. You never asked about her. You never asked how I was, really. You never once considered that the man who built an empire might be lonely, that he might be grieving, that he might need his family. You were just waiting for me to die. So I decided to give you a preview. The silence from the airlock was absolute. Even Cynthia's sobs had quieted to hiccups. They were all listening now. The truth was a colder shock than the sealed door. This bunker, I continued, my voice softening to a deadly calm. I didn't build it for the end of the world. I built it for the end of your world. The world of entitlement. The world of taking. The world where Brad was just an ATM with a pulse. I built it to show you what happens when the machine finally stops dispensing. I built it to watch you realize that without me, you are nothing. You have no skills, no resilience, no grit. You are soft, spoiled children in a suddenly very hard world. Jason finally looked up from the keypad, his face pale. The soul aflare. The reports, it was all a lie. A masterpiece of misdirection. I confirmed, a note of pride creeping into my voice. The blackout is real, of course. I paid a small fortune to have a few key substations taken offline for maintenance. It'll be back on by morning. The Aurora projectors, very good ones, mounted on the ridgeline. The video footage, Hollywood. You'd be amazed what you can get with a generous budget and a lack of ethics. The world is perfectly fine. Well, as fine as it ever was. It's just your little corner of it that has ended. The impact of that truth was physical. Chloe sank to her knees, a low moan escaping her lips. David leaned his forehead against the door, his body slumping in defeat. Cynthia began to rock back and forth. Jason just stared at his hands. The tools he'd thought would save him, now revealed as instruments of his own entrapment. You're going to leave us in here to die? Jason asked, his voice hollow. Oh, eventually. The outer door will open, I said, resuming my seat. In about 47 hours, to be precise. It's on a timer, a fail-safe. By then, the event will be over. The sun will have risen on a beautiful new day. The lights will be back on in the city. The birds will be singing. I let that image hang there for a moment. Let them picture it. Salvation. So close. But you'll be in here, I continued, my voice like ice. You'll have been in here for 2 days, in the dark, with no food, very little water, and the slowly fading hope that I was going to relent. You'll emerge into that bright new world, and you will know that you were left here to rot by the man you took for granted. You will know that your salvation was always just out of reach, and you will have to live with that, every day, for the rest of your lives. You will have to look at each other and remember this moment, the moment you realized you were utterly, completely, and irrevocably powerless. That was the real revenge, not death. Death was a release. This was a life sentence, a memory that would haunt every Christmas, every birthday, every moment of supposed familial joy. It would be the ghost at every feast, the cancer in every relationship. I had given them an incurable trauma. I switched off the intercom. Their silent, despairing images were enough for now. I had other things to attend to. I spun my chair to another console. Time to check on my other projects. The beauty of this plan was its layers. While my immediate family was suffering in the airlock, the rest of my so-called loved ones were getting their own tailored doses of comeuppance. I brought up a feed labeled Aunt Lydia, my sister, the one who'd always been so keen to offer parenting advice after my wife died, telling me I was too hard on David, to focus on work. She lived in a nice condo downtown, paid for by me, of course. Yesterday, she'd received a very official, very frightening letter from a fictional law firm stating that, due to the impending global financial collapse triggered by the geomagnetic event, the assets backing the trust that paid her mortgage and living expenses had been frozen indefinitely. The letter advised her to seek immediate shelter and liquidity. The feed showed a camera it'd hidden in a smoke detector in her living room. She was frantically packing a suitcase, her face tear-streaked, throwing jewelry and stacks of cash into a bag. She was believing it. The prepper propaganda it'd been subtly feeding her for years had paid off. She was about to flee her comfortable life based on a complete fiction. Let her spend a few nights in a crowded public shelter with the real desperate people. It would be good for her. Another monitor showed Cousin Mark, a smug, sanctimonious environmentalist who'd always looked down on my wasteful wealth from the lofty height of his trust fund, had received a different package, a set of doctored government documents leaked to him by a source, proving that the solar flare was a government cover-up for a massive ecological catastrophe, a deliberate culling of the population. The feed from his apartment showed him barricading his door, handing out gas masks to his terrified roommates. He was in full survivalist mode, but the kind based on paranoia and misinformation, not practical skill. He was living his worst nightmare, and he had no idea it was all a movie he'd written and directed just for him. I spent a happy hour cycling through these feeds, watching the ripples of my deception spread through the network of leeches and sycophants that made up my extended family. Each one was experiencing their own personal apocalypse, tailored to their greatest fears and insecurities. It was a symphony of schadenfreude, and I was the conductor. A soft chime echoed in the control room. Dinner time. I rose and walked through the blast door into the main living quarters of the bunker. The contrast was always jarring, and I loved it. From the stark, technological command center to warmth. The lights here were softer, mimicking a natural sunset. The air was scented not with sterility, but with the smell of roasting chicken and herbs from the kitchen. The space was vast, open plan, with a high ceiling, real wood finishes, and comfortable furniture. A library wall held thousands of real books. A hydroponic garden flourished under full-spectrum lights, providing fresh greens. It was not a survival bunker, it was a 5-star apartment buried underground. And I was not alone. Alara moved from the kitchen area, a smile on her face. She was 30 years my junior, with intelligent eyes and a quiet strength that reminded me of my late wife. She was a structural engineer I'd hired years ago to consult on the bunker's design. She saw not a madman's folly, but a masterpiece of engineering. She appreciated the work, the vision. We'd fallen in love over blueprints and stress test simulations. "How are our guests?" she asked, her voice laced with a dark amusement that mirrored my own. "Adjusting to the new accommodations," I said, accepting a glass of wine from her. A rich, velvety Malbec. David's fists are a bloody mess. Cynthia's had a complete nervous breakdown. Jason is still trying to hack his way through a wall of encrypted steel. And Chloe, I think she's catatonic. Alara nodded, her expression not unkind, but utterly pragmatic. They made their choices, a lifetime of them. Indeed, they did. We ate a magnificent meal at a reclaimed oak table. Pan-seared chicken, roasted vegetables from the garden, fresh bread. We talked about books, about music, about the new strain of tomatoes that was thriving in the hydroponic system. We did not talk about the people slowly suffocating on their own despair 30 yards away. They were a problem that was solving itself. This was the final, most beautiful layer of my revenge. I hadn't just built a prison for them. I had built a paradise for myself. A paradise with someone who chose me for who I was, not for what I could provide. A true partner. While they were learning the lesson of their own worthlessness, I was enjoying the reward of my own hard-won contentment. After dinner, I returned to the control room. The scene in the airlock had changed. The frantic energy had burned out, replaced by a lethargic despair. They were sitting on the floor, backs against the walls, not looking at each other. The initial storm of emotion had passed, and the grim reality of a long, slow wait was setting in. David had torn a strip from his shirt and was clumsily wrapping his bleeding hands. Cynthia was shivering, though the temperature in the chamber was a steady 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Jason had given up on the keypad and was just staring into space. Chloe had her phone open, swiping through photos and videos of her old life. A silent movie of a world that was, for all intents and purposes, dead to her. I watched them for a long time. I felt nothing. No pity. No guilt. No satisfaction anymore. Just a calm, steady sense of rightness. This was the natural conclusion of the path they had chosen. This was justice. I was about to switch off the monitor and retire to my library when movement on one of the external cameras caught my eye. It was the feed from the eastern tree line. I zoomed in. 2 figures, dressed in dark, tactical-looking clothing. They were moving with a purpose that was out of place. They weren't looters or panicked civilians. They were professionals, and they were on my property. A cold trickle of something that felt suspiciously like unease dripped down my spine. This wasn't part of the script. I quickly checked the other perimeter feeds. Nothing. Just these 2. They had stopped at the edge of the lawn, scanning the house and the grounds. One of them pointed directly at the bunker's primary entrance. How? The entrance was camouflaged. Unless they knew exactly what they were looking for. I felt Elara's presence behind me. "Brad, what is it?" "We have visitors," I said, my voice tight. She leaned over my shoulder, her eyes narrowing at the screen. "Who are they?" "I don't know." The lead figure raised a hand to his ear, communicating with someone. Then, both of them started moving across the lawn, not with stealth, but with a confident, direct stride, heading straight for the bunker door. My mind raced. This was a variable I had not accounted for. I had planned for every contingency involving my family, every possible reaction from the authorities once the blackout was discovered. But I had not planned for armed strangers showing up at the precise moment of my greatest triumph. Had Jason somehow sent a signal? A distress call before he was locked in? No. It jammed all outgoing signals from their devices the moment the door sealed. The 2 men reached the massive blast door. One of them knelt, examining the seam. The other looked directly up at the hidden camera I had mounted above the entrance. He smiled, a cold, knowing smile. Then he gave a little wave. He knew I was watching. Then he spoke. His voice was crisp and clear, picked up by the camera's sensitive microphone. "Mr. Bradshaw, we know you're in there. We'd like to talk. It's about your investment." The man's voice, filtered through the external speakers, was like a shard of ice slipped into the sterile, controlled climate of my bunker. "Mr. Bradshaw, we know you're in there. We'd like to talk. It's about your investment." Investment. The word was a key, and it turned a lock deep in the vault of my memory, a vault it sealed shut decades ago. It wasn't one of my legitimate ventures, the storage facilities, the logistics empire. This was something else, something from the raw, hungry years. Elara's hand found my shoulder, her grip tense. "Brad, who is that? What investment?" I didn't answer. My focus was laser sharp on the monitor. The 2 men weren't attempting to breach the door. They showed no signs of aggression. They just stood there, waiting. The one who had spoken, the leader, had a face that was all hard planes and cool competence. He looked like he could wait forever. My mind raced, sifting through the past. The early 90s. My first real fortune, made not in storage, but in the chaotic, unregulated wild west of post-Soviet Russia. I'd gone over there with a briefcase full of bravado and a handful of contacts, buying up industrial assets for pennies on the dollar. It was a fire sale of a fallen empire, and it'd been one of the many vultures picking at the carcass. There was a partner, a man named Silas, a shadowy figure with connections that ran deep into the old KGB and the new, burgeoning Russian mafia. We'd made a killing together on a uranium processing plant in Kazakhstan. The paperwork was a nightmare of shell companies and forged documents. The investment was a river of cash that flowed into Silas' pockets to grease the wheels of various communist-era officials, making them suddenly very enthusiastic about capitalism. My contribution was the initial capital and the audacity. His was the muscle and the menace. The deal made me rich beyond my wildest dreams. It also left a permanent stain on my soul, one I'd tried to bury under layers of legitimate success and philanthropic donations. It'd cut ties with Silas, paid him a final, enormous severance to ensure he'd stay away, and had spent the last 30 years pretending that chapter never happened. Apparently, Silas had kept the receipt. "It's a ghost," I said finally, my voice hoarse, from a life I thought he'd left behind. On the screen, the leader tapped his ear again and nodded. He spoke once more, his voice devoid of impatience. The terms of our agreement have changed, Mr. Bradshaw. Silas would prefer to discuss it in person. Open the door. A cold fury began to burn through my initial shock. How dare they? How dare this spectre from my past intrude on my masterpiece? This was my moment, my revenge, my perfectly orchestrated symphony of despair. They were an off-key note, a screech of feedback threatening to ruin everything. They can discuss it with the steel, I muttered, my hand hovering over the console that controlled the external defensive measures. I had more than just a thick door. The perimeter was lined with non-lethal but intensely persuasive countermeasures, sonic emitters that could induce crippling vertigo and nausea, high-intensity strobes that could cause disorientation and seizures. It designed it to deter the desperate and the curious, not a professional assault, but it would have to do. Brad, don't, Elara said, her voice sharp. We don't know who they are or what they want. Antagonizing them might not be the play. They want to come in. I snarled. They are not coming in. Before I could activate the countermeasures, the leader did something unexpected. He unclipped a small, ruggedized tablet from his belt. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it up to the camera. It wasn't a threat. It was a live video feed. The image was shaky at first, then stabilized. It showed a room, a well-appointed living room, and in a high-backed armchair, sipping a glass of brandy, sat Silas. He was older, of course. The lean wolfishness of his youth had settled into a jowly, prosperous heaviness. His hair was silver, but the eyes were the same, flat, cold, and intelligent. He looked directly into the camera, a faint, unpleasant smile on his lips. Bradshaw, he said, his voice carrying a thick Russian accent that 30 years in the West hadn't fully erased. You look well. Your little hole in the ground seems comfortable. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just watching me through his men's cameras, he was seeing my control room feed. He had access. How? Jason. It had to be Jason. In his frantic attempts to hack the inner door, he must have established some sort of external link, a back door I hadn't found and closed in time. Silas people had piggybacked on it. My own security, weaponized against me. I must admit, Silas continued, swirling the brandy. I admired the show. A beautiful piece of theatre, teaching your ungrateful pups a lesson. I respect it. It's what I would have done. He took a sip. But now, the intermission is over. We have business. We have no business, Silas, I said, my voice booming through the external speakers, my anger overriding my caution. We settled our accounts 30 years ago. A down payment, Silas corrected gently. The world was different then. The value of assets has changed. The uranium plant we acquired, its value has appreciated significantly. The geopolitical landscape has made it a strategic prize. You own 49% of that prize, Bradshaw. I want it. It's a worthless shell company. I spat. The plant was decommissioned years ago. The facility was decommissioned, Silas said, his smile widening. The land it sits on, however, is now believed to hold the second largest deposit of high-grade lithium in Central Asia. The green energy revolution, Bradshaw. It makes for a strange bedfellows. And very, very valuable real estate. The paperwork, the original titles we acquired, they are the key. And I need all the keys. The absurdity of it crashed over me. My revenge, my perfect, personal apocalypse, was being hijacked for a corporate raid. My past, the one it tried so hard to bury, had dug its way out of the grave and followed me right to my fortified door. I'm not giving you anything, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You can stand out there until you rot. Silas' smile didn't falter. I think you will. You see, I've come to negotiate, and they've brought a bargaining chip. The image on the tablet shifted. The camera panned away from Silas to the corner of the room. A young woman was tied to a chair, a gag in her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror. Elara gasped, her nails digging into my shoulder. Anya. Anya was Elara's daughter from a previous marriage. A bright, artistic soul studying in Paris. She was the one thing in this world Elara loved more than anything. More than me, certainly. Her safety, her distance from all this, was the cornerstone of our plan. We were to wait out the apocalypse here, and once it had my fill of watching my family's spirit break, we would emerge. I would play the relieved survivor, my family the traumatized ones who'd barely made it, and then we would disappear. Elara, me, and Anya, using the considerable resources it squirreled away in untraceable accounts. It was the final act. Silas had found her, had unraveled the entire endgame in one move. She's a lovely girl. Silas' voice came back, smooth as oil. Very brave. She didn't want to give us the access codes to your systems, but everyone has their price. Hers was her mother's safety. A noble sentiment. Elara made a small, choke sound. The world, my perfectly controlled world, was tilting on its axis. Now, Silas said, his voice hardening, you will open the door. My associates will come in. You will sign over your shares in the Kazakhstan venture, all the original documentation, every digital and physical copy. And then, you and your woman may go. You can even take your squalling family from the airlock. I have no use for them. I only want what is mine. Lies. Every word of it was a lie. Silas never left loose ends. The moment he had what he wanted, we were all dead. Me, Elara, Anya, my family in the airlock would be cleaned up, a messy complication erased. I looked from the monitor showing Silas and the terrified Anya to the monitor showing my family in their red-lit prison. David had his arm around a weeping Cynthia. Jason was holding Chloe, who was shaking uncontrollably. In their absolute despair, they had finally found a shred of humanity, a fragment of the family bond they'd always lacked. They were clinging to each other, not as entitled parasites, but as terrified human beings facing the end. And I saw it then. The flaw in my perfect revenge. I'd wanted to show them they were nothing without me. But in doing so, I had made myself the monster. I had become Silas. I had become the kind of man who used people as pawns, who inflicted pain for a principle, who believed that wealth and power granted the right to play God. The taste of filtered air turned to ash in my mouth. Silas' voice crackled with impatience. My men are not paid to stand in the cold, Bradshaw. Your decision. Open the door, or my associate in Paris will put a bullet in your stepdaughter's head. You have 60 seconds. The timer on my console began its countdown. 59, 58, 57. Elara was crying silently, her face a mask of anguish. She looked from Enya's image to me. She didn't plead. She just looked, and in her eyes, I saw the terrible question. What kind of man was I, truly? I was Grandfather Brad, the architect of doom, the master of the game. I had planned for everything, except for this, except for the fact that my past was not a ghost. It was a predator, and it had followed the scent of my own hubris right to my door, except for the fact that in trying to prove my family's worthlessness, I had forgotten to check my own. 57 seconds. I looked at the airlock monitor, at my son, his bloody hands, his broken spirit. I looked at the external feed, the two professional killers, waiting patiently for my surrender. I looked at Silas, smug and victorious in his armchair. I looked at Anya, her young life measured in seconds, and I made my decision. My hands flew across the console. I wasn't opening the door. I was entering a series of commands I had never thought I would use. Override codes, emergency protocols. What are you doing? Elara asked, her voice trembling. A contingency I never planned for, I said, my voice grim. A failure of imagination on my part. On the screen, the leader of the two men outside frowned, listening to something in his earpiece. He looked up at the camera, his cool confidence replaced by confusion. I had just initiated the bunker's total lockdown protocol. The primary entrance wasn't just locked, it was sealed. Permanently. The hydraulic systems were disengaged and purged. The door was now a 3-foot thick plug of solid metal, fused to its frame. No one was getting in that way. But that was the easy part. The hard part was what I did next. I opened a communications channel I had kept dormant, a secure, encrypted line to the one external authority I had a grudging respect for, Colonel James Pritchard, the commander of the nearby Air Force Base. It sold his unit some customized logistics software years ago. He was a hard man, but a straight shooter, and he owed me a favor. The line connected. Pritchard, a crisp voice answered. Colonel, Bradshaw, we have a situation. Hostile takeover attempt at my estate. Heavily armed paramilitaries. They have a hostage overseas. I believe they are acting on behalf of a known Russian oligarch, Silas Volkov. A pause. Bradshaw, what the hell are you talking about? There's a massive power outage we're dealing with. The outage is a localized sabotage, Colonel. Part of their operation. I can prove it. I am streaming you all my security feeds, including live audio from the perpetrators and proof of the hostage situation. You'll see. You need to send a team. Now. And you need to contact your counterparts in Paris. The hostage is at this address. I read off the address Silas had inadvertently shown in the background of his feed. I could hear the colonel barking orders to someone in the room. The game had just changed. It was no longer my personal revenge fantasy. It was an international incident. They're at your bunker door. Pritchard asked. They are, and they're not getting in. But I need you to make sure they don't get away. Hold tight. Bradshaw. Assets are en route. 8 to 15 minutes. -1 minutes. An eternity. On the external feed, the two men were no longer waiting. The leader was on the radio, his voice urgent. They knew something was wrong. They knew the door was now a permanent fixture. They began to fall back, heading for the tree line. They were going to disappear. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. The joker in the deck. I switched the intercom back on to the airlock. The sound of ragged breathing and soft crying filled my control room. David, I said. My voice stripped of all malice, all triumph. It was just a voice, an old man's voice. They all flinched, looking up at the camera with fresh terror. Dad, David's voice was a broken thing. Listen to me, very carefully. The world isn't ending. The lights will come back on. This was my sickness, my failure, a stunned silence. But right now, I continued, urgency creeping in. There are two very dangerous men outside. They work for a dangerous man from my past. They came for me, but they're leaving. And if they get away, a young woman, an innocent girl, will die. I could see the confusion on their faces. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. There is a way out of the airlock, I said. An emergency manual release. I never told you about it. It's behind the panel to the left of the inner door. Jason, you'll see it. It's a large red lever. You have to pull it down with all your weight. It will vent the chamber and open the outer door. Hope, terrible and fragile, dawned in their eyes. Why? Jason asked, suspicious, his hacker's mind always looking for the trap. Because when that door opens, I said, those men will be in the tree line, heading for their extraction point. They'll see it. They'll stop. They'll think they have a way in. They'll come back. You just have to delay them. For 10 minutes. The cavalry is coming. Delay them. David said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. With what? Our bloody fists. With this, I said. I typed a final command. With a soft hiss, a panel slid open in the airlock wall, revealing a compact rack. Inside were two items, a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, and a yellow, industrial-sized air horn. The shotgun is loaded with rubber bullets. They won't kill, but they will hurt like hell, and they will get their attention. The air horn make noise. Lots of it. Be unpredictable. Be a nuisance. Just keep their eyes on you for 10 minutes. That's all I ask. I fell silent. The choice was theirs. I had imprisoned them, tortured them, shattered their world. And now I was asking them to save mine. To save Alara's. To save Anya. I saw the war on David's face. A lifetime of resentment and pain against the basic, fundamental impulse to do something. To not be a victim. He looked at Cynthia. He looked at his children. Then he looked at the camera. And for the first time in decades, I saw my son. Not the disappointed heir. Not the grasping money manager. I saw the boy who used to look at me like I could fix anything. He walked to the panel and took out the shotgun. It looked alien and brutal in his soft, blooded hands. Jason, he said. His voice quiet but steady. The lever. Jason didn't hesitate. He ripped off the panel. grabbed the large red handle, and threw his weight against it. A loud alarm blared inside the airlock, and in my control room, a computerized voice announced, "Emergency decompression sequence initiated." On the external monitor, I saw the two men stop dead in their tracks at the tree line. They turned. They saw the massive, sealed blast door begin to slowly, ponderously, swing open. A cloud of condensing air billowed out like a dragon's breath. Their extraction was on hold. The prize was suddenly back on the table. They drew pistols from shoulder holsters and began to advance back across the lawn. The door finished opening. My family stood there, silhouetted in the doorway, the red emergency light from the airlock casting them in a hellish glow. David stood in front, the shotgun held awkwardly. Jason was beside him, holding the air horn. Cynthia and Chloe were behind them. The lead operative raised his hand, shouting something, a demand to stand down. David Bradshaw, my son, raised the shotgun, aimed it at the sky, and pulled the trigger. Boom. The sound was enormous, echoing across the silent estate. The recoil knocked David back a step, but he held his ground. The two operatives hit the dirt, then rose, now moving laterally, using covering fire. They weren't amateurs. This wouldn't hold them for long. Jason lifted the air horn and pressed the trigger. A deafening, blaring wail cut through the night. It was ridiculous. It was pathetic. It was glorious. The operatives paused, confused by the sheer absurdity of the sound. It was so out of place, so non-threatening, that it broke their professional rhythm for a precious few seconds. David fired again, this time in the general direction of the men. The rubber round kicked up a divot of grass 10 feet from the lead operative. It was enough. They took cover behind a stone planter. The standoff had begun. I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs. Each second was an agony. David and Jason were shouting, though I couldn't hear what. The air horn blared again. They were buying time. They were fighting. For me. The lead operative popped up from behind the planter and fired to suppress shots. The round smacked into the door frame near David's head. He flinched but didn't retreat. He fired the shotgun again. Boom. 5 minutes had passed. The operatives were getting impatient. They started to move, one providing covering fire while the other flanked. They were going to overrun them. It was a matter of time. "Where are they, Brad?" Elara whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. Then, a new sound. A deep, throbbing pulse. From the eastern camera, a dark shape blotted out the stars. A Black Hawk helicopter, running without lights, descended like an avenging angel. The two operatives on the ground looked up, stunned. The game was over. The helicopter didn't land. It hovered, ropes dropped, and dark figures fast roped to the ground, spreading out with professional efficiency. U.S. Air Force Security Forces. The two operatives dropped their weapons and put their hands on their heads. It was over that fast. On the other monitor, Silas' feed had gone dead. The connection lost. I could only hope that Pritchard's call to Paris had reached the right people in time. I slumped back in my chair, utterly drained. The adrenaline receded, leaving a vast, hollow emptiness. On the screen, my family was being surrounded by airmen. David slowly lowered the shotgun, his body trembling with shock and relief. He looked up at the camera on the door frame. He couldn't see me, but he knew I was watching. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just looked, and then he turned and gathered his wife and children into his arms. They held each other, not as prisoners, but as survivors. I had gotten my revenge. I had shown them the end of their world, and in doing so, I had given them a chance to find each other in the rubble. I had wanted to prove they were nothing without me. Instead, they had proven they were something on their own. I turned to Elara. Her face was pale, but the terror was gone. "Anya," she asked. "We have to trust the system now," I said, my voice ragged. "It's out of our hands." I stood up. My legs felt weak. I walked to the control panel for the primary entrance. The military would need to get in. I had to deactivate the permanent lockdown. I had to let the world back in. My hand hovered over the command. I looked at the monitor showing my family, surrounded by airmen, being led away from the bunker, away from me. The door was sealed from the outside. But I had sealed myself in, long before that. I had built the perfect bunker to protect myself from the world. But I had never considered that the thing I needed protecting from most was the man I had become inside of it. I entered the code. With a deep, groaning shudder that I felt through the floor, the great door began to unseal. I was opening the door, but I was still locked inside, and I knew, with a certainty that was colder than the filtered air, that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The revenge was complete, but the sentence was just beginning.